All right, as we were just talking in the last segment with Senator Steve Daines of Montana, legislation was introduced earlier today to prohibit federal funds from going to any college or university with a campus health clinic that provides abortions or abortion drugs. Now, there was a press conference earlier today. Congressman Chip Roy and Congresswoman Mary Miller have introduced the companion bill on the House side. So you've got a Senate sponsor, Steve Daines, on the House side, Chip Roy and Congresswoman Mary Miller leading the effort. At that press conference earlier today, Congressman Roy had this to say regarding the legislation and its importance.
Because it's not just a case of California gone crazy, but it's a preview of what is to come if good people do nothing. Legislation like the Californians has been proposed in other states, and it's only a matter of time before other abortion extremists attempt to pass it in their states. We believe that this is something that is critically important for the health and well-being of young women. We shouldn't be a country where we take women at their most vulnerable time, and they're young, they've gone off to college in this case we're talking about, and essentially allow for there to be chemically induced abortions for a do-it-yourself abortion, and what that does to the psychology of the young woman, and what that does for, obviously, the life of the unborn.
Joining me now to talk about the Protecting Life on College Campus Act of 2021 and more is Congresswoman Mary Miller, who represents the 15th Congressional District of the state of Illinois. Congresswoman, welcome back to the program.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here and an honor to be co-sponsor of this important legislation.
Well, let's talk about this legislation. Some on the left say they're the ones that speak for women, and women want reproductive freedom, and a measure like this is simply a solution in search of a problem. What would you say to that?
Well, it's just not true. And I brought up today that God is about life and the truth, and Satan's about death and lying, and the abortion industry is about death and lying. And it's most unfortunate. There's, just tens of millions of babies that aren't with us and wounded women. I've talked to many of them, and even recently in the last couple of years, women that have been on campus and thought they were told that this is a safe, easy, painless way to take care of their pregnancy, and they were number one, self-focused and foolish and uneducated about what they were actually doing. So it's not safe and painless, and it damages women physically, emotionally, and spiritually.
The evidence of that is overwhelming, but that
Yes.
is in fact the case. From your conversations with many of these women, is it your opinion that those abortion providers, those that are providing these chemical abortions and others on the college campuses, are misleading these women down this path?
Definitely. And we actually heard the testimony of a young woman today who was in high school, and I think she was 18. She said she was afraid to tell her parents, and she took the pill and took both pills, and then nothing happened. But then a couple months later, she was in class and started bleeding and passing, giant blood clots, and almost died, and gave her testimony of basically she was injured physically, emotionally, and spiritually. But she did say in her situation, which is a little unusual, wherever she went, the state she was in, different states have different laws. She had a sonogram. I think she said she was 7 weeks, but she said they were very reticent. They didn't want her to see it. When they did show it to her, they affirmed to her that it wasn't a baby. And then she did take the pill, went home and took the second one. But they are preying on vulnerable women that are afraid and, like I say, definitely motivated by self. But, they're young women, they're not mature, and they live to regret it.
Congresswoman Miller, this issue of life, the sanctity of life, and then of course the others on the other side would say abortion rights, reproductive rights, that this is a clear line of distinction between the two parties. I mean, you've got one party that, as you were out there with your colleagues today, speaking on behalf of life, and you have another that's advocating to force Americans to pay for it, to be a party to it. They want to fund Planned Parenthood. I mean, this is black and white from where the two political parties stand today.
Well, clearly they don't want it to be rare. They're definitely promoting it, and they are not promoting informed choice is another thing. And I've said before that whoever controls the information controls the people, and they're not informing the women. I've heard, which you may know, large statistics. One man that goes to a pregnancy or an abortion clinic by St. Louis told me that 90% of the women that actually have a sonogram change their mind. Now, I believe Missouri requires a sonogram and Illinois does not, but they're preying on vulnerable women.
Yes, there's no question technology has brought us to this point where a majority of Americans now view life as something valuable to be protected. A majority, at least a plurality, see themselves as pro-life, and it's technology. It's over 80% of women who will choose life
Science
once
on
they
our
see.
side.
Yes,
They want
absolutely.
to know all about science. This is science. It kind of reminds me, I believe, whenever back in the 1800s, when Louis Pasteur was trying to inform the medical community about germ theory, what he saw in the microscope. And those doctors at that time prided themselves on how much blood they wiped on their aprons. They'd go do an autopsy, get the blood on it. Then they'd go deliver a baby, and they were passing diseases. And he tried to tell them. And because he had the mechanism, he had the microscope, and he saw it, but they rejected him. They mocked him. Who are you? You're not a doctor. Go back to your lab. And, we're doing the same thing today. Talk about Stone Age. They're rejecting the truth that you can see on the sonogram. We know it. We're on the side of science.
Right. And they're rejecting science in more than one area. There's
And
no
we're
question
on
about it.
God's side, and we're on the side of the good of our nation, because our children are the hope of our nation, and they're everything for our nation.
Congresswoman Mary Miller, we're out of time. We got to leave it there, but let me ask you to do me a favor. Don't ever lose your candor. You see it clearly and you speak it clearly, and I appreciate that. And it's so good to have you on Capitol Hill.
Thank
Don't go away,
you.
folks. We're coming back.